Yo, yo, yo. In this video, I'm gonna take you through my 3 fundamental stages to building any business when you're starting out. I've used and applied this in the music industry and now in the property industry as well, where we've built an 8-figure development business. So this should hopefully be good, useful knowledge for anyone out there looking to start a business, or if you're on that journey and want to establish where you are in your journey and how you get to the next step. So stay tuned and subscribe. So this is completely self-made. I'm not taking this from any book or script or educational platform or anything like that. This is something I established when I was first in the music industry, and I started this band and was like, I want to become famous in this band and build this band, you know, the sky's the limits. How the fuck do you get from nowhere to becoming an arena selling artist? It doesn't just happen one day. You don't just get really lucky. There are fundamental stages you have to go through. So during the 5 years of building that band, I established the core stages that we entered. Each time we got into that new stage, it was like, okay, well, what's next? What do we have to do as the next part? And I documented a lot of that journey, not just visually through video content for the sales and marketing side, but also just wrote down what we were doing, creating loads of different business plans and like trying to establish where we are, how do we get to the next part. And in doing so, I came to the conclusion that you have a 3-year runway. Like when you start a business, there's 3 years. Now you can do it quicker. You can break this down into 3 quarters, into 3 6-month cycles or whatever. But ultimately there are 3 years and 3 core stages to building any business. And you can break it down quite simply, and you've got the first year of chucking shit at the wall and figuring stuff out. The second year is polishing the turd, refining the strategy. And the third year is tripling down on that strategy and actually building out the business. And then the rest of the years, sky's the limit. But to establish that business, there's a 3-year process that has to take place. So if you want to start a business, don't expect big results in the first 6 months. It will take you time because there's so much you need to learn. There's a market to compete with, etc. And I'm going to go through that in this process. But I learned it in the music industry and then applied it and refined it with the various businesses we've built in the property sector. So we'll start with the year 1. So year 1, you are chucking shit at the wall. That is what you're doing. It's the ideation phase. By this point, you should have known what sector you want to go into, what kind of business you want to build. We'll use property for this example. So you know what your strategy is, you know how you want to do it, and you've got a rough idea on how you can scale it, but you've not done it before. You don't actually have the experience. It's all theory in your head. So you have to go through a year where you're just throwing ideas out there. You're throwing processes into the works. You're trying to figure stuff out. So that can be broken down into different parts. So I'm trying to highlight them here to give you an idea of what that first year might look like. But fundamentally, you have to study sales and marketing because a business is nothing if it doesn't have sales. So if you don't have inbound customers, then it isn't a business, literally by definition. So you have to be able to do sales and marketing. And we're assuming that when you're starting out on your own. So you are the jack of all trades. You're doing everything. And you fundamentally have to be able to do sales and marketing. You have to be able to get product out the door. You have to be able to get investor interest in this scenario into your developments. So to do that, you either need to know how to do it or you need to partner with someone who does. And you kind of have a product and systems guy, and then you have the sales and marketing guy, the guy bringing the business in, the guy managing the business. When it's small, it's easy to do that. When it's small, you can't even do it all yourself. So sales and marketing is absolutely fundamental. Obviously the product is as well, and the strategy, but if you can't bring business in, you won't go anywhere. Then there's the strategic ideas. So as you're bringing in sales and marketing, as you're figuring out how to acquire interest in what you're doing, you obviously also need a product or a strategy to triple down on. In property, that can be fairly straightforward in a way because there's readily available product on the market with already tried and tested strategies you can apply to that product, which may be different if you're building, say, a SaaS service or a music business or something else. But generally, you need to look around at your market, look at what others are doing and implement those strategies. And you need to test a few, test which ones work for you. So you have to be able to bring in the sales, you have to be able to assess your strategies. And don't worry too much about sticking with the first strategy that you come up with because it might not be the best one. You have to be able to pivot and iterate in that first year, which also comes down to assessing the viability. As you're implementing that strategy and you're going out on your first deal, you need to be able to understand, how viable is it for us to deliver this and make money? You have to be able to make money. So you need to constantly assess your viability in multiple ways. Time input, cost, profit, risk, liability. You need to be able to look at all those variable aspects and assess that within your strategy. And then at the same time, you're assessing scalability. So the strategy might be really profitable. It might be great, but only because you and your business partner are spending all the time and all the energy on it with no real structure. Therefore, can you scale that? Can you bring in staff? Are the margins there to absorb the overheads for you to be able to scale out that strategy? So you need to think about things in the limit as well as assessing the viability. And you obviously need a route to market. If you are going to scale it, how are you going to be able to get that in front of your prospective audience or your investor base or your customers, depending on what you're selling? So you have to know what your route to market is. You don't necessarily need to triple down on that that in the first year. You just need to know how you're going to generate demand for what it is you're doing. And then there's your first customer. So after you've studied the sales and marketing, you've gone through all your strategic ideas, you're assessing the viability, assessing the scalability of your strategy, and then you're establishing a route to market to be able to get those sales in, to implement your strategy so that you can get your first customer. Because your first customer is the start of your business. That's when it really starts. You know, you're then delivering on behalf of someone else. You then have a fiduciary duty to look after your customer, especially in developments, where you may be looking after their money or looking after their investment interests. So when your first customer comes in, that's when you're really testing the model. And that is the next crucial stage. You need to be able to extract data from what it is you're doing. When you're starting out, that can be very hard to do because you don't necessarily know what data is useful. So you kind of end up going quite wide with your aperture and you're taking in lots of data. Some of it's not very useful, and you need to get good at refining that over time because it creates mess. It becomes messy. You don't necessarily know exactly what you're doing. You know you're going in this sort of direction. You don't exactly know how to fix all the problems that come up, and you're collecting back all this information, trying to make decisions with it, but they're ill-informed because you just don't have enough data and experience to know what the right decisions are. So it can be messy, and you just have to accept it's going to be messy, and you've got to work hard and implement and do everything required to look after your client and make sure that you're getting through the strategy and not going bust, which is fundamentally what you need to not do. And that is, most businesses fail because they just go bust. They don't implement the right things. They're not looking at the right data and testing and pivoting the strategy. They're not looking after their clients' interests properly. They're not putting in the time and energy. They've not established the correct route to market, so they can't get that scale in to be able to sustain it as a full-time career. And then they're not assessing the viability either. So you have to make sure all of this is happening in that first year, and it is a lot to take in, which makes it really messy. It means you've constantly got to be optimistic to withstand the pressures and withstand the difficulties that come along. Difficulties will come along, and then it's going to be really disappointing. And then also, because it's disappointing and you're optimistic, you're also really stressed out because you're going, there's so much opportunity, so much potential, but we're just fucking this up all now and we can't figure it out. And that makes you really stressed. So you have to be good at dealing with stress. And that first year should be a deep dive in how to deal with stress and how to understand how to fix problems. You have to be a solution provider. Thank you, Jack Jiggings, for that statement. It's a great one. Be a solution provider for your business and for your clients. So that first year looks something like that. You are throwing shit at the wall. You're doing everything. You're the jack of all trades. You're trying to keep your first client happy, but you're trying to establish scalability and the viability of your strategy. You're testing it, you're pivoting it, you're extracting data, but you don't know quite what to look at. It's just like all over the place, but activity breeds results. As long as you're going in the right direction and you're trying to keep focused, keep to what works and try and get rid of what doesn't work, which then brings us to the second year, which we're going to call, it's staying in the theme of fecal matter, we're going to call this polishing the turd, which we can also call refining the strategy. So now that you've kind of created this thing, you're not exactly sure in what it really looks like or exactly how it operates, but you just know instinctively where to go and sort of what to do next. And that's kind of how most people feel in that scenario. Not everyone, some people are better at starting out a business and they may have good business acumen from other businesses and things like that. And that's where understanding and implementing these processes can help you, gives you a bit of a guideline. But this is where you're refining that strategy. You're trying to establish a core business, which means you're reflecting on that first year in detail. You should be constantly reflecting all the time anyway. But once you have a first year of trading, you want to look back and look, what were all the pitfalls? Assess your systems, assess your processes, assess your sales and marketing. You want to be looking at those things in detail. What can you improve? What can you omit? What things should you try differently? It could vary from so much to what software system you're using to manage your project management, to how are you communicating with clients? Do you have ready-made templates for certain parts of the project lifecycle? There's so much that could come into it, which is why we can broaden it out to systems, processes, sales and marketing. So your systems that look after all the data and all the software and everything, kind of like the brain of your operation. Then the processes are how you actually enact those systems and what your SOPs look like, so your standard operating procedures around your business. And then the sales and marketing, bringing in the business. So those are the fundamental things you need to be looking at, establishing what parts you've already experienced in your first year, and then what you need to do in the second year to improve them. And then identify the bottlenecks. In doing this exercise of reflecting on your first year, and if you're still constantly establishing scalability and viability, then you should be able to see where the bottlenecks are now, where they have been, and where they may be if you continue to scale at the rate you're trying to scale at, or if you continue with this specific strategy. So find your bottlenecks and eradicate them, or find systems and processes that can work around them. Because if you don't pick up on bottlenecks early on and constantly try and solve them, then you end up with a litany of bottlenecks and you ignore them, you leave them to one side because you go, we're making money, like, the problem, I need to get around to it, but I just haven't been able to get around to it, and it's kind of getting left there. there, and then eventually that problem just 10x's, and then you've got a real issue because you're like, fuck, well, now I really need to fix it because it's kind of compounding over time as I keep ignoring it. And that happens to a lot of early business owners because there's only so much time in the day, which starts to bring us on to the next part, which is begin creating job roles and responsibilities. Because of those bottlenecks, because of the systems and processes that you're trying to establish, you then start to need staff members in different areas. Now, you may be able to run most of the work yourself, but you need to at least start establishing what those roles and responsibilities look like, so you're preparing the business for a new resource to come in and take over that work, alleviating lots more of your time to then continue that process of implementing more systems and processes, more job roles and descriptions in other areas of the business. Because that's what you need to do as a business owner. You need to be pulling yourself out of the operations so you're getting to the top where you can just focus on the sales and marketing. We'll come on to that shortly. If you're watching this and you're an investor who wants to build a property portfolio, then we've designed an end-to-end development service for all of our clients. Over the years, we've brought in-house all the aspects in the project lifecycle, from sourcing and acquisitions to construction and lettings and management on the back end. What this means is we've created the only one-stop shop in the country for a vertically integrated suite of development services. And it means we're one point of contact for all of our clients' needs. Now, access to our services are not going to be open forever because we only have so much capacity to deliver the projects. But if you're interested in our service, then click the link on the screen or check the link in the video description and you can book a call in with our investment director. But for now, back to the video. So who would be your first hires? Once you've established those jobs and responsibilities, who would be your first hires? You're gonna get someone out of uni, you're gonna get a young gun, get an administrator, get a PA, get an accountant, get a construction partner. Who are you gonna get? Who do you really fundamentally need in your business as your first hire? Some of my mates who run large businesses say that the best thing to do is get a PA as the first thing. Now, I didn't do that and I still don't have a PA, but we have lots of administrators within our business that cover different aspects of our projects. But I don't have a personal assistant because I'm trying to constantly remove myself from the business, so I don't feel like I see a need for a personal assistant. However, all my friends who I've spoke to about it, who have personal assistants, say, well, it's only when you get a personal assistant that it's actually super useful and it kind of changes your life, because they take away a lot of the inbound, a lot of the stuff that you don't like doing, they can do on your behalf, and it becomes just a line item task that they can give you and you can quickly find a solution, so you're saving tasks. Keep removing yourself. So I need to think myself about getting a PA and how I would want to implement them into our business. As some people see that as the most important thing to do at the start. Get someone who could give you bandwidth in any of the tasks that you're doing. Some people prefer an accountant. They might be happy and satisfied with the tasks they're doing, but they want someone running the numbers. And then some people may want an operator, a partner, a duplicate of themselves in some way that's also a bit of a jack of all trades. You need to figure that out. Ultimately, who are your first hires? Who are the staff that's going to come in? You need to figure that out, because at the moment you are Jack. You are jack of all trades. And it's always an awful place to be, but you learn so much. You probably learn the most about your business in those moments where you are doing everything. And that's when it becomes easier to delegate those things to other parties, because you've experienced the various job roles. And you need to learn how to escape Jack. How do you escape being Jack? And that comes back to that constantly removing yourself from the systems and processes, which you can only do if you're reflecting on your business and establishing where the job roles and responsibilities need to be and finding the right hires for those positions. And then you need to admit what doesn't work. If something isn't working, no matter how much you like doing it or no matter how much you like that part of the strategy or whatever it is, just get rid of it. If it's not working and it's causing you issues, either minimize it, outsource it, or get rid of it. It completely depends, but you don't have to do things. There are things within your business that you feel like, oh, we have to do that. There's no choice. We can't get around it. The regulator says this, or this says that. But there might be a solution to at least omit it from your process by either outsourcing it or just not doing it because you may not need to do it even though you think you do, or pivoting your strategy away from that thing so you can omit it from your process. So you have to look at the things you can get rid of and then refine what does work. Keep the things that work and make sure you're elaborating more on the things that work, because it's the 80-20 principle, which is a great book, by the way, called 80-20. And the idea being 80% of your work produces 20% of the results, and it's 20% of the work that produces 80%. So you need to refine the 80% that's producing 20% of the results and refine that down, but expand the 20% that's producing the 80. It's a really good book. You must read it if you're starting any business. It's foundational, it's principal to efficiently building a business and making sure you're establishing what works, what doesn't, and then weaning out the chaff. So clean up around the edges. So it's kind of arbitrary, it's sort of quite vague, but it makes a lot of sense, if you've built a business, you know what I mean by cleaning up around the edges. There's just things that you leave to one side. So not necessarily a process or something core, but it's just things that you kind of don't perfect. You get it done, but it's not done perfectly. And there's ways you can clean up the edges. You can make things really slick. Like you can make things as slick as you want, depending on how much work you want to put into automating the process, or the systems that you can build in, the software you can leverage, or the hires you can bring in as well. But it's really important that you try and constantly clean the edges. Otherwise the edges get rougher and rougher, and then that can cause damages later on. Maybe not something detrimental to the business, but it can slow down the business. It can make it kind of archaic and stagnate in certain areas. So you want to constantly clean it up. So when you see those, that paperwork piling up, or this thing that you're doing really late at night on a weekend because you just don't have time to fit it into the week, well, that's a rough edge. You need to be able to smooth that out. How can you pull in that process and fold it into something you're already doing? Or how can you bring in a hire to clean up that process for you? Don't just leave the edges rough. Don't just accept that you have to work 24 hours a day because you've got no choice because you're just too busy. That's never, ever the right thing to do. You need to be able to systemize and minimize your time requirements within the operations of the business. And it comes from cleaning up around the edges. Keep the edges of your business clean. And then the rest will look after itself, in theory. And then you got year 3, which is tripling down on what works. So you've done the first year, which is ideation, all over the place, blah, blah, blah. And then the second year, you're kind of going, oh, I'm starting to find like what it is that's working here, but it's sort of like, it's not quite fitting in this square peg in a round hole situation. And you need to be able to just finesse it, get that strategy working, get the business rocking in the third year so that you can triple down and build the business for the next 5 to 10 years. So for that, you need to build for scale. You need to build the business by looking at the processes, looking at the operations, looking at your margins, looking at your overheads, finding that critical mass and building for scale. If you're not building for scale, then what's the point? It doesn't mean you have to meet that scale, but you want to build a business for scale, because it is scale that helps your business survive. It gives you more of a leading advantage over your competitors. If you have a small business with a small amount of clients, then obviously it's a lot riskier business. You want to have a large, wide business with a diversified client base, diversified income streams. So you want to be able to build for scale, which ultimately means you also want to build for sale. Build for scale, build for sale. Because if your business isn't good enough that someone doesn't want to come and buy it, then it's just not a good enough business. Now, some businesses inherently aren't built, you just can't sell them. They just may not have that underlying value or any residual value. So you need to be able to try and build your business at least where someone else would want to come and buy it. And to do that, it needs to work without you in it, which means it's a much better business, and it's a much better business for you from a lifestyle standpoint as well, because you can be on top of your business and manage the business from the top down without having to be stuck in the weeds of the operations. That is why you bring in staff. That's why you bring in a team to implement those operations. They get paid a wage, they implement their time and energy, and that builds that part of the business, and you need to manage that process. You then have middle management that manage those departments, and you need to be able to see critically that critical path to each of those aspects of your business so you can sit at the top and manage it effectively. And to do that, you need to know that you're building for scale and building to sell. So the fundamental principles that you should follow, even if you don't want to sell it, even if you don't want to scale it to the limit, you should be implementing that as a thesis in your brain as to how you're trying to treat your business. And then you can hold it at certain points. You could spend 1 year where you're just sort of stabilizing it and you're getting the business fluid and liquid, establishing that critical mass and keeping it there, and then scaling from that point. You kind of build and plateau and build and plateau and do it deliberately. Or you just fucking keep rocketing on and building, which is kind of what we'd be doing in our business, but it's very stressful to do that. So then you want to establish clear SOPs from end to end within this third year, because you can't triple down on something unless you have it completely documented as to how each part of that business runs. So you can use something called Loom, which is a great video software, and you can screen record and film the different parts of the process, from the systems and softwares through to diagrams and charts showing how you might manage the project and the project life cycle and what you need to look for when you're viewing a property or sourcing the property or building a product or whatever it is, or giving that service out as a broker. Depends completely on your business, but every business needs SOPs from end to end. You need to know how things work, how your business operates, and it needs to be written out into a clear format so that you can use that to train up new staff and to assess your business model, and so you can iterate it and grow it. So you need to be doing that in year 3. And then you need to solidify your brand and core messaging. What is your brand? What are you selling? What is your message to your end user? So for example, with Bowman Partners, when we built out the servicing arm, it was simple. We are an end-to-end solution for armchair investors. We find the asset, we build the asset, and then we retain it on the long term for you. You don't have to do anything. That is our core messaging. It's said in different ways, but that is ultimately what it is. We are an end-to-end solution for development services. That is what we're advocating for. And you need to find out, what is your core message and what brand you have to back that up. Ours is a property brand, a property development brand, and we have the YouTube channel and everything else that feeds into that. So then you want to start building out that team. That team, you may already have a few hires by this point, or a business business partner, but you really then want to, now that you've clearly defined your SOPs and you're aiming to build for scale, you need to be able to know what team members you need next and start bringing in those team members so that you can achieve that scale that you're aiming for. And to do that, you need to be able to forecast longer durations. So rather than just looking out for the next year, the next stage, you need to be looking at 3 and 5 years as well. You can also look at 10 years, depends on how big your goals are. But yeah, you want to forecast longer durations regarding resources and hires. So not just hiring people and teams, but also what resources will you need? Do you need office equipment, an office? Do you need vehicles? Do you need bigger systems? Do you need data centers? What is it that you need? And you need to establish where those are, because you may be subbing out a lot of those resources at the moment, but there'll be a point where you can bring them back in and save on that margin from subbing them out. And that's what we've done with our business. It's why we brought in the lettings, why we brought in the construction, because we established when we got to that critical mass, it was cheaper for us to bring it in-house and take on that risk internally rather than paying someone else that margin, and it strengthens our business as a core pillar, vertically integrated from the start to the finish. So yeah, you need to be able to forecast longer durations and plot out on a timeline where you'll need what people, what you'll need, and when. Doesn't mean you have to stick to those dates exactly, but at least you have an idea on where you need to be, and then you may bring some of those dates forwards or delay some of those dates depending on where your business is going. And in doing that, you need to find your critical mass. How much sales and revenue do you need for the size of business that you are based on your overheads? So, your revenue per head count, as well as, where's your optimal margin? Because there'll be a point where you're pushing your staff too far because you don't have enough resources, but you're making more margin, but it's not sustainable. And then there'll be a point where it goes the other way and your overheads are eating into your margin. Your staff might be a bit happier because they're not working as hard, but you're simply not making the money. So what's the point of doing the business? So you have to find that critical mass. Like, where is the optimal position for you to be in as a business at your current size for you to make the kind of desired margin that you forecasted? So that's what you have to be able to do. And then you should be focused on sales and marketing or product. By the end of this third year, this third stage, because remember, this doesn't have to be a 3-year plan. I just always think if you're starting a business from scratch, you need a 3-year plan because it's going to take you 3 years to build anything worth building. But you may be able to do it sooner. You may already have industry experience. So see this as 3 core stages. But let's say you're in the 3rd year, you bring in staff, you've got the SOPs, you've established the business, the strategy, the brand. It's all coming together. So you need to make sure you're focused, because you should have the team on the operational side. You need to be focused on the sales, the marketing, and the product. And ideally, you bring someone in to do the sales and the closing, and you're focused as the face of the brand on the marketing. Like with our business, look at me right here, right now. I'm here talking to a camera. You may think tangibly, if you were in this room, is this really a good spend of your time? Well, yes, it is, because I'm scaling the message and the marketing to thousands of people with just my time spent here now. It's the most scalable thing I can do in our business. And who's the best person to speak for the business? It's the business owner. It's the person who founded the business, the person who knows the business and speaks for the business. So you don't want to outsource that. Ideally, you yourself as the business owner are heading most of the marketing. And some of the best businesses ever built, Apple, all of Elon Musk's businesses. I know he talks about not marketing, but really vicariously, the way he uses social media and the way he's always in the public domain is him marketing his businesses. And Steve Jobs famously is a great marketeer. They built the best businesses because they were able to speak for the business's message and that core value proposition to their clients or to their customers. So you have to be on the sales and marketing. And if you really hate sales and marketing and you've just got no aptitude to do sales and marketing, you hate it, but you're amazing at product, you might be an engineer or you might be a product designer or something, then you can do product, but you need a business partner or someone you ultimately trust to do the sales and marketing side of things. But I would always say, particularly, you want to be in the marketing. You can always oversee the product. There are better people out there than you to deliver the product. That's almost always the case. But there's no one better to market the business because you are the business. And if you are the business and you're marketing it, then you're creating a personal brand rather than a business brand. And people out there watching and your audience don't want to buy into a business, they want to buy into people. So if you speaking for your business is creating, it's almost anthropomorphizing your business. It's giving it personality. And that's what you want to be doing. And then you need to feed the beast, man. That 3rd year, you've got to feed that beast because now you've got overheads, now you've got staff, now you've got responsibilities, now you might have liabilities and debt with a bank and interest going out and all kinds of things, office rent and things like that. So you've got to feed that beast. And that's become your driver, which is why you have to do the marketing, because feeding that beast is marketing and sales, of course. But if you're really good at marketing and you triple down on the marketing, the sales come much easier rather than the other way around. But you have to feed the beast. From there on out, you are feeding the beast, making sure that business is coming through the door no matter what. And obviously, you then spend the rest of your time overseeing that business and making sure that you're constantly holding your managers to account to ensure that the SOPs and the operational procedures are improving and improving and improving. And in doing so, you are becoming the captain of the ship. You're looking ahead and you're fixing the leaky holes. So you're the captain of the ship right at the front, yeah? And you're marketing all the time. You're steering the ship in the right direction. You're looking ahead to see what icebergs coming up? Where do you need to go? Is there a storm coming? You know, what's happening in the market? And you are leading that ship. That is you at the front, and everyone else is paddling and they're making sure the business is operational. But you are responsible at the front. You need to be forecasting, you need to be looking ahead, and you need to be fixing the leaky holes. If there are issues and your staff can't deal with them, you need to be able to step in still. But if you can do as I am doing in this business and bringing in someone like a Steve who can operate behind you and make sure that the business is being looked after and those leaky holes can be plugged for you, and you may only then need to get involved every now and then rather than for every problem in the business, which is really important, because once you're at the top of that business and you've got multiple staff and multiple departments and multiple operations, there's always a problem. And if you're constantly the guy fixing the problem, then that's an issue. So you have to make sure your staff got initiative, make sure you've got the right processes in place, make sure your staff are trained adequately within their operations, and that is all a part of you being the captain of the ship. But importantly for you, you need to look ahead. You need to be looking ahead, forecasting not only for the business's growth, but also what's coming in the future. Is there interest rate hikes? Is there potential inflation? What's the war in Ukraine going to do? All of these kind of things you need to be looking at so you can establish that your ship is going to get from point A to point B and it's not going to sink along the way. And that's this video. That's my 3 stages for building any business. Again, I've not taken this from some education or anything. I didn't go to university. I didn't study business as a degree. This is just from my experience, from what I've seen, from the people I've spoken to, from the businesses I've built. This is just how I feel about it. I feel you need 3 core stages, and you need to at least allow for 3 years to build anything of significance. And you're always going to be fucking about at the start and throwing shit at the wall. And then you're always then going to be trying to refine that and come up with a strategy or a business model that works. And then you're going to be tripling down on it at the end because you need to. You need to then find out what works, wean out what doesn't, and then triple down and scale that business. So these are the 3 stages I would tackle it in, the things you need to look out for within those stages. But let me know. Chuck me some comments. Ask me questions. Do you think anything's missing from this? What else could be better? What other videos do you want to see? Let me know. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.